All right, everyone. Ready to dive into the world of Sydney restaurants.
Let's do it. We're serving up a heaping plate of financial knowledge today.
Because let's be real, opening a restaurant, it's not just about crafting the perfect menu or curating that Instagram-worthy ambiance.
It's a business, my friend, and a tough one at that,
Yeah.
especially here in Sydney.
We're talking cutthroat competition, sky-high rents, and enough hidden costs to make your head spin.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're dissecting a blog post from Menu Veal that breaks down the financial nitty-gritty of opening a restaurant in Sydney this year.
Think of it as your financial game plan to navigate this delicious but demanding industry. So you want to open a restaurant in Sydney, huh? That's awesome. But before you start sketching out your dream menu and picking out those stylish chairs,
You need to know what you're getting yourself into financially.
and trust me, this blog post doesn't sugarcoat anything. It gets real about the costs, from the glaringly obvious to the easily overlooked, like scarily easy to overlook.
We're talking those, wait, I have to budget for what? Moments that can really throw a wrench in your plans.
We've all been there. But that's why we're here to equip you with the knowledge to avoid those financial pitfalls.
Think of it like this. You wouldn't open a bakery without first understanding the cost of flour, sugar, and ovens, right?
Exactly. This deep dive is all about understanding the ingredients that go into a successful restaurant launch, and those ingredients, well, they involve a lot of dollar signs.
Let's just say it straight up. Opening a restaurant in Sydney, it takes serious capital.
We're talking anywhere from a couple $100,000 to well over $1 million.
And that's just to get those doors open.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are the biggest factors that influence the startup costs?
Well, the type of restaurant you're dreaming of plays a huge role.
Right, like a casual cafe versus a fancy fine dining experience.
Exactly. A cafe might be on the lower end of the spectrum, maybe around $200,000 to $500,000 to get up and running. But a high-end restaurant,
Get ready to open up that wallet.
you're looking at a completely different ballpark. Think upwards of 1.5 million, maybe even more, depending on all the bells and whistles.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of lattes to sell. And we haven't even touched on rent yet, which in Sydney can be a beast of its own.
Oh, yeah. Sydney real estate, beautiful harbor views, delicious food, and some of the highest rents in the world.
The blog post really dives into how different neighborhoods can translate into wildly different rent prices.
Prime real estate in the CBD, where foot traffic is king, is going to cost you a pretty penny.
We're talking potentially $2,500 to $4,500 to $4,500 per square meter annually.
Per square meter. Ouch, my wallet just felt that. Okay, so maybe the suburbs are a bit easier on the bank account?
They can be, but it's not just about affordability. It's about finding the right fit for your restaurant's vibe and target market.
You got to know your audience. Are you catering to the corporate lunch crowd in the CBD, the brunch-loving hipsters in Surrey Hills, or families in the sprawling suburbs?
Location, location, location. It's not just a catchy phrase, it's a fundamental truth in the restaurant industry.
And speaking of location, the blog post gives some really interesting insights into average rents across different Sydney suburbs. Like, get this, the eastern suburbs, known for their cafes and casual dining spots.
What's the damage? Still pricey, but more manageable than the CBD. Think around $1,500 to $3,000 per square meter annually.
See? It pays to do your research. Even within Sydney, there's quite a bit of variation.
It's about finding that sweet spot, a location that screams, "Eat here," but doesn't keep you up at night worrying about making rent. But all right, let's say you've secured that perfect location. You can practically smell the sizzling garlic and hear the sizzle of the grill.
But hold your horses
Yeah.
before you start planning that grand opening party.
We've got to transform that empty space into a restaurant. And that, my friend, is where renovation and fit-out costs come in. And let me tell you, they can be sneaky.
Sneaky is an understatement. It's way too easy to get caught up in picking out the perfect light fixtures and those oh-so-trendy bar stools.
And completely blow your budget before you even order your first espresso machine.
It's a slippery slope, that design process. One minute you're choosing paint colors, the next you're debating the merits of a custom-built pizza oven.
And don't even get me started on the allure of those vintage reclaimed timber tables. They're beautiful, but man, they can be pricey.
So let's talk numbers. Just how pricey are we talking about here? The blog post gives a pretty wide range for renovation costs in Sydney.
Hit me with it.
Brace yourself.
Yeah.
Somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 per square meter for a complete renovation.
Okay, so that's a pretty big range. What explains the difference?
Think about it. Are you going for that minimalist industrial chic look, or Are you creating a warm and inviting space with lots of custom woodwork and those exposed brick walls everyone's crazy about?
Right, a fresh coat of paint versus a complete gut renovation, two very different beasts, financially speaking.
Exactly. And this is where that age-old debate comes into play. DIY or hire a professional designer?
The eternal struggle. The blog post does a good job laying out the pros and cons of each approach. So talk to me about the DIY route. What are the potential savings, but also the hidden costs we need to be aware of?
Well, on the surface, DIY seems like a no-brainer, right? You're saving on those hefty designer fees, and hey, who doesn't love a good IKEA hack?
Especially when you're trying to stretch every dollar.
Exactly. But here's the catch with DIY. It's not just about the money you might save, it's about the hidden costs. The time, the energy, and let's be honest, the potential for things to go very, very wrong.
Oh, I've been down that DIY rabbit hole before. It can be a real test of your patience, your relationships, and your sanity.
Right. Plus, restaurant design is more than just picking out pretty furniture and a trendy color palette. There's a lot to consider. Flow, functionality, meeting building codes. It gets complicated quickly.
That's where a professional designer can really earn their fees, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Think of it as an investment, not just an expense. A good designer brings so much to the table. They're masters at maximizing space, creating efficient layouts, and sourcing materials that are both stylish and durable.
So they're like the restaurant whisperers of the design world.
Exactly. Plus, they often have those industry connections that can save you money in the long run. They know where to find the best deals on everything from furniture to kitchen equipment.
They're like the savvy negotiators of the design world, using their powers for good. So in a way, hiring a designer can actually help you stay on budget.
You got it. Plus, they're pros at anticipating those potential pitfalls that could cost you big time down the road. They're thinking about things like ventilation, plumbing, electrical needs, all those behind-the-scenes details that can turn into major headaches if they're not addressed early on.
Suddenly, that designer's fee is looking less like an expense and more like an insurance policy against a reno nightmare. I like the way you think.
That's all about perspective. All right, so let's say you've got your design sorted, whether you've gone the DIY route or teamed up with a design guru.
The walls are painted, the tables are set, the espresso machine is gleaming. You're this close to opening day.
Not so fast. Can't forget about the legal side of things.
Oh, right. Permits, licenses, all those official hoops you have to jump through to actually open those doors legally. The blog post doesn't shy away from this part, and for good reason. It can be a real maze.
A maze is an understatement. We're talking about a whole stack of paperwork, from food safety licenses and liquor licenses to council permits for things like outdoor seating, signage, even noise levels.
It can feel overwhelming, but the blog post does a good job breaking it down into manageable steps.
It's all about ticking those boxes and dotting those I's.
And hey, it's better to be safe than sorry, right?
100%. Those licenses and permits might seem like a pain, but trust me, they're far cheaper than the fines and legal battles you'll face if you try to fly under the radar.
Okay, so we've got our permits, our licenses, our beautifully designed restaurant. It's really starting to feel real. But wait, we need a team to bring this culinary vision to life.
Ah, yes, staffing. The heart and soul of any restaurant, but also, let's be real, a significant expense, especially here in Sydney.
The blog post really dives into the nitty-gritty of wages for different restaurant roles, and it's not just about those upfront hourly rates either.
Right, we're talking superannuation, potentially paid leave, sick leave. It all adds up.
It's a good reminder that your team isn't just about passion and talent, it's also about payroll.
It's about finding that balance between attracting top-notch talent and keeping your labor costs in check. And that's no easy feat in a competitive market like Sydney.
Speaking of finding balance, the blog post also highlights that age-old debate about casual versus full-time or part-time staff. What are the financial implications of each approach?
Well, casual staff can give you that flexibility, which is great when you're just starting out and not sure how busy you'll be. But keep in mind, those hourly rates are typically higher, and scheduling can be a bit less predictable.
Right, you're paying a premium for that flexibility.
Exactly. With full-time or part-time employees, you might save on those hourly rates, but then you're also responsible for things like paid leave and sick leave.
It's a trade-off. And of course, there's the legal side of things to consider. The blog post reminds us about the importance of understanding and complying with the Fair Work Act.
Absolutely. Treating your employees fairly and ethically isn't just the right thing to do, it's also essential from a legal standpoint. Those penalties for non-compliance, let's just say they're not something you want to experience.
Definitely not worth the risk. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Location, design, the legal maze, and the art of building a stellar team. It feels like we're finally ready to talk about the most important element of any restaurant, the food.
And let's not forget the drinks.
Right, food and drinks. But before we get too carried away with menu planning and wine tasting, we need to talk about cost.
Because those delicious dishes and handcrafted cocktails don't come cheap.
All right, so we've covered a lot of those upfront costs, but let's get real about those ongoing expenses. What are some of the things that tend to sneak up on new restaurant owners?
Well, it's those everyday expenses that can really add up, like your utilities, for instance.
All right, electricity to power those ovens, gas for the stovetop.
And water. Don't underestimate how much water a restaurant goes through.
It's not just about washing dishes either. It's about prepping ingredients, making those delicious sauces, and, let's be honest, keeping those thirsty customers hydrated.
Exactly. And those utility bills, they're not getting any smaller, especially with rising energy costs.
The blog post actually gave a pretty eye-opening range for electricity bills alone. Anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 per month for a typical Sydney restaurant.
That's a decent chunk of change.
Yeah.
And that's just electricity. You've got gas bills, water bills. It all adds up.
It's a good reminder to be mindful of energy consumption wherever possible.
Absolutely. Think energy-efficient appliances. Explore solar panels if your budget allows.
And don't forget those good old-fashioned energy-saving habits. Turning off lights when you leave a room, making sure those fridge doors are closed properly.
It all makes a difference. And speaking of things that make a difference to your bottom line, let's talk about food waste.
Oh, food waste, the bane of every restaurateur's existence. It's not just about the cost of the wasted ingredients either.
It's about the environmental impact, too.
Exactly. The blog post we're looking at actually offered some really practical tips for minimizing food waste.
Like what? Give me some insider secrets.
Well, it starts with careful inventory management, knowing what you have on hand, what's about to expire.
And getting creative with those soon-to-expire ingredients. Got some veggies that are on their last legs.
Whoops up a delicious soup of the day. Or maybe a flavor-packed sauce.
There you go. Turn that potential waste into a culinary masterpiece.
Exactly. And composting. Let's not forget about composting.
Right. Turn those food scraps into something good for the environment.
Okay, so we've covered those essential operating costs, but what about those tech-related expenses? Because let's face it, in today's digital world, you can't run a restaurant without some tech tools.
You're talking about those point-of-sale systems, online ordering platforms, and of course, everyone's favorite.
Wi-Fi. Got to keep those Instagram foodies happy. But in all seriousness, those systems are essential for a smooth operation, but they do come with a cost.
They do. A good POS system, for instance, which is like the heart of your restaurant's operations, can set you back a few $1,000s up front.
Plus those ongoing monthly fees for software updates and support.
It's an investment, but a necessary one. And then there's your online presence, your website, social media marketing, online ordering platforms.
It's a digital jungle out there.
It is. And it can be easy to get lost in the noise. That's why it's important to have a clear digital marketing strategy. Who are you trying to reach? Where do they hang out online? And how are you going to get their attention?
It's about spending your marketing dollars wisely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Those essential operating costs, those sneaky tech expenses. Anything else aspiring restaurateurs should be prepared for?
Well, let's just say that things happen. Equipment breaks down. Staff turnover is a reality in this industry.
Right. It's not always smooth sailing.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to have that contingency fund built into your budget.
The unexpected can and will happen.
It's all about being prepared.
This blog post has been such a helpful guide for navigating the financial side of opening a restaurant in Sydney.
It's been eye-opening for sure. There's so many things to consider.
There are, but at the end of the day, it's about going in with your eyes wide open, having a solid plan, and being passionate about what you're creating.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be lucky enough to be sitting in your restaurant enjoying the fruits of your labor.
Now that's a reservation I'd love to make.
We'll be first in line. All right, everyone. That wraps up our deep dive into the exciting but often daunting world of Sydney restaurant startups. Remember, knowledge is power, so do your research, plan carefully, and never be afraid to ask for help along the way. Until next time, happy eating.